Hello, everyone. Welcome to our session at Prime Virtual Global Forum 2021. We're happy to be with you today. And our session's name is Facilitating Sustainability and Mindset for a Resilient Future. And what we will be doing today, we will be talking about our forthcoming book, which has a name, Revolutionizing Sustainability Education Stories and Tools of Mindset Transformation. And all the great people that you see here on this screen are contributing authors of this book, which has 17 chapters, and we will present 9 of them for you today, starting with Morgane from Excelia Business School, representing France, Morgane Fritz. Michael Lee from Montclair State University in the USA will present his chapter. Then we'll move to Spain with Isabel Rodriguez Tellado, who will represent her work. The next would be Jan Hermes from Oulu Business School in Finland. Then Julia Stolberg-Walker and Mike Yu will present their work. They both represent George Washington University. Then Lasse Lishnell, without Carol, it was not possible for her to join us today because she's having a surgery, but both represent Stockholm School of Economics and they will present their chapter. Then we'll go to Ayako Hong. She is from Maharishi International University in the USA, and she will be talking about her inspiring, innovative teaching tool. Then Isabel will present her innovation, and we will finish with Amelia. All of our contributing authors will be telling you the stories of innovative teaching pedagogies that they use with their students and the reflective work that is reflected in the book, because in our book there'll be more than 150 voices of students, and each of the contributing authors will tell a story how they use not only the head, but also the heart and the hands of students to shift their mindsets with the innovative pedagogies that they have created and described in the forthcoming book, which will be published by Routledge. We just signed a contract yesterday with Isabel Romanovsky, who is together with me the editors of this forthcoming book, and it will be published in the Prime series. So we're really happy that Prime supported us, and we have this opportunity to present this book at this global forum. At this point, I would like to stop the introduction from my side and hand over the word to Morgane, who will start her 3-minute talk about her teaching innovation. So Morgane, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Katerina. Thank you, Isabel, and nice to be there among you for this Prime conference. So I'll present briefly what I've done with my students and what is the content of this book chapter I contributed to. So I'll follow a basic scheme: what, why, how, and so what. So the book chapter I wrote is about actions on the Sustainable Development Goals. So I invited students in my lecture on corporate social responsibility and business ethics. They were master students. I invited them to become actors of the Sustainable Development Goals. And so why I did that is because I wanted to teach differently and to really make students active in the course. And that's what I thought, yeah, maybe I can ask them to do something for the SDGs and see what comes out. And this is heavily inspired by some trainings I had with Isabel Rimanocci on the sustainability mindset. So that's my first tryout after this training. So what I asked students is to pick one of the SDGs that they like, or whatever SDG, and within the week we had lectures together to conduct an action on it. So they were a bit afraid at the beginning. They didn't know really how to do it, and they thought they cannot do much because they are just students. But what comes out of this exercise is really interesting, and the idea was to show them that they have actually a power and they can be change makers and contribute to the SDGs. So I asked them to conduct this action and then write an essay to justify why they chose this SDG, if it's personal reason or another reason, to describe the impacts they could see of their action and their feelings. So some wanted to focus on past actions. They didn't feel comfortable in conducting something new. They didn't know what to do, but that was fine as well. But those that really did something, it was usually small actions, but that really make them feel something different. So it was like paying attention to waste and realizing that sorting waste actually is easy. You just need to make it a habit, or paying attention to what they buy and deciding to buy only local food. And then they realize that it's not so difficult, but then you need to go somewhere else than just the supermarkets. Yeah. So the so what is that it leads to some emotions and the concept of emotional learning, which makes students shift and realize that they can contribute to the SDGs. Thank you.
So much, Morgan. 3 minutes were really good in terms of typing from your side. So we're moving now next to Michael Lees in the US, who'll share his wonderful story.
Hey, hello everybody. Nice to see all of you, meet all of you. For the chapter for this text on what, looked at spiritual pedagogy and eco-literacy as it relates to working with the sustainability mindset. Spiritual pedagogy and eco-literacy are about looking at how to read the world using your head, heart, hands, and spirit. Head being all cognitive information processing, what you're gathering and what you're taking in as you're moving through learning something about being human and relationship to the world. The hands part of it is relative to having something experiential happen, being able to connect touch to information processing. So you have head and then heart comes into play here. Heart is looking at intelligence and the idea of helping develop intelligence and what does it mean to foster or work with information. Once we have information gathered, the hands engage. Intelligence kind of takes that idea of knowledge and brings experience and knowledge together to hopefully, the ultimately biggest goal would be to manifest as something called wisdom. But yeah, that's big stuff right there, thinking about it from that side. But head, heart, hands, and spirit being the last part of that is grounded in language. I'm thinking about how when we're sitting here talking about spirit, one reason why I bring spiritual pedagogy to this understanding of eco-literacy and how to work with the sustainability mindset in the classroom is to ground it in meaning making and context. You have all this information, you're in a classroom, you're learning, and you're trying to process going through one course that you might be in, going through the college experience, and trying to relate to why is all of this important in that kind of context, grounding that out so that what is learned in the classroom can be learned in the classroom, then move from the classroom out into the world. That idea of connecting both worlds for students in that way. So thinking about it in terms of why. Why is that important? Well, I think one of the biggest things I think about as a teacher is, will what is being learned here in the classroom be remembered 20 years from now? It will be remembered 25 years from now. It will be remembered 4 days from now. Thinking about it in that kind of context. So spiritual pedagogy brings this kind of grounded out thinking about questions of meaning, motivation, commitment, context, so asking that big question, why? Well, yeah, here's why you're learning what you're learning, and here's ways you can think about applying it and bringing that out. So how? The example I use for spiritual pedagogy and the development of eco-literacy in this context is a tree journal assignment that I've been using in my classroom for a number of years in that way. The tree journal gives students an opportunity to meet a tree on campus. The assignment entails briefly just meet a tree, hang out with the tree, and ground with the tree, and make that kind of connection. Now, so what, in the context of so what, this allows students to have a place and space to kind of work with what they are processing, to be able to ground out what they are learning, and to be able to contextualize it in some way, shape, or form. One of the end products of that is students have found that having a tree friend is someone that is really nice to hang out with on campus and have some time to spend some time with that as their own and in relationship to something else. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Michael. I will never forget your trees. So all of the readers of our book will definitely also profit from the visuals that you have in. And thank you for keeping up with the time. Well, now moving to Spain, Isabel Rodriguez, would you share with us what you have done with your students?
Thank you, Ekaterina, and thank you, everybody, also the people joining us for this session. I'm very happy to share my chapter in this really interesting book, which had to do with bringing a first-person perspective, having to do with poverty, to my undergraduate students in the second year of economics and business. Now, the problem we faced is my students do very well in memorizing the facts, learning the theories, so their brains are in the right place. But being from a developed country, we found that it was very difficult for them to connect on a first-person basis with the reality of poverty. So what we really wanted to do was create a shift in their mindset. Poverty is not just something you learn about, something you memorize, something that happens far away. Poverty is something each of us can do something about. And what we did was, well, that's very difficult to do. We assume that's true. But how about trying to bring first-person online games, first-person reflections? So we shift the perspective from they to me, to I, what I can do. So the first thing we did was go back to the beginning of the semester. We typically ask students, what do you think is the most important thing you will learn in this course? And in global political economy, over 50% say, well, something about poverty and hunger and the sustainable development goals. So we remind them that this is the chapter that you were most interested about. Let's make the most out of it. Then we ask students to take the Gapminder test. We don't know as much as we think we know, so let's keep our minds open. And then we go through the theories, the data, all that interesting stuff. And like Michael said, will you remember it a couple of years from now? Maybe if you see it in your own personal perspective, that will help. So we ask students to play 2 online games. The first one is Ayiti, which is based on the story of a 5-people family in Haiti and how they get through a year. So we ask them to play that, make the decisions, feel the pain. You don't have enough food to feed your family. Not all your 3 children can go to school. So those decisions, in order to drive them home, we ask them to reflect on this experience, to write first-person reflections, to call on to their feelings and connect their feelings to their brains, and make sure that the course content kind of connects with their heart's contents as well. And then Ayiti sometimes feels very removed because it depicts a third world country, but they're very interesting games. So we just use one, which is called Spend, which was created by the Urban Ministry of Durham. And that one is slightly different because it focuses on poverty and homelessness in the US in a setting that is more familiar to many of them. We found that the results were very, very promising. Students reported deeper understanding of poverty, and about 70% of them, in one way or another, in the reflection, they somehow mentioned that they had changed the way in which they saw poverty. Poverty is complex, it's difficult, but it is something we can do about. So I strongly recommend that if you're interested in this, you give it a try. It's very low risk and the payouts are great. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Isabel. What a promotion of such an important topic and digital tools that we all can use with the new media and playing that students love. Thank you so much. And we're now moving to Jan, Finland.
Thank you, Ekaterina. Hello, everyone. My name is Jan. Together with my students, Elina, Vera, Leon, Martin, Camille, Sini, Emma, Hanna, and Katarina, we wrote the book chapter, Grasping the Unsustainable in Sustainable Entrepreneurship Education. In the chapter, we talk about an alternative learning method applied in an entrepreneurship course which centers on creating economically viable solutions to pressing social and environmental issues. So we show in this chapter how a sustainability mindset, you could call it a new normal, is built to resist more traditional and oftentimes unsustainable ways of doing business. And we propose that creating this necessary resistance, so in other words, building a lasting sustainability mindset, can be achieved through grasping its anti-phenomenon. And with that, we mean an excursion into the unsustainable. In the sustainability course, the students and me, we together explore fundamentally unsustainable business models and their consequences for social, environmental, and economic conditions in and around the business. This is done by means of a combination of facts and powerful visual stories. The students they're even provoked to design unsustainable business models, which pay least regard to social and environmental concerns. So you could call this also taking a walk on the dark side. And our argument here is that the experience of something so profoundly unsustainable makes it easier to grasp what a sustainable world needs to look like, simply because the contrast with a sustainable state is the starkest possible. Students reflect upon the factual and emotional jolting experienced during the course in their learning portfolio, and the portfolios indicate that students' idea of what sustainability is and what it means rests on a sturdier foundation because of grasping what it is not. And with this, we propose that other teachers and learning facilitators explore the possibilities of conveying sustainability-related issues by means of a powerful anti-phenomenal approach. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you so much, Jan. I think that was the biggest chapter in terms of authors involved, the most inclusive with so many students part of it. So thank you so much for sharing it. And we're moving now on to Julia and Mike, United States. The floor is yours.
Awesome. Thank you everyone for all your ideas. I'm like a sponge soaking up all of these ideas. As Ekaterina said, I'm Julia Storberg-Walker from George Washington University, and my co-author Mike Yu is also here. Our chapter was about a doctoral level leadership studies course. And the course typically had been taught about learning about leadership. And this activity actually cultivates development of the inner leader within. So there's an internal and external landscape component to this. And it's through contemplative practices where I'm extending the doctoral-like training or education through contemplative practices beyond the cognition and intellect, which is a new space, especially in higher education in my environment. Basically, the contemplative practices allow for some emergence of non-dual, more holistic thinking and integrative thinking, and changes some kind of meaning-making schema in the doctoral students in this activity. So the activity asks the students to write about their leadership challenges in their professional environment. And all of our students are mid to senior level executives in organizations. And write about their leadership challenges, then do a contemplative practice of their choice for 3 to 4 weeks, and then rewrite about their leadership challenges and compare the pre and post, description of their challenges. And many students are shocked when they compare the pre and the post, because over and over again, their reflective papers say, my leadership challenges haven't changed, but I've changed. And so to illuminate one student's perspective, Mike is going to be sharing about his experience.
Thank you, Julia. So from this assignment, I have perceived a significant change in my mind. It is noticeable when it comes to decision-making, especially. Becoming a student under the Newtonian paradigm for a long time has trained me with a relatively static ways of knowing and thinking. However, with the help of different lenses, such as the quantum approach, I started to realize the way I knew what I knew might not be comprehensive, and the facts I believed might be false and temporal. Comparing my writing before and after the contemplative assignment indicated that I had shifted my mind to an open and dynamic state. And I would say that leadership as one of the core competencies in the modern world should be understood and educated through an open format rather than as a series of tools and concepts. The experience I had with Dr. Storberg-Walker is inspiring and educational, and it is like opening a new window for me to see the world differently. And I believe such an experience will be helpful to others as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Just in conclusion, Ekaterina, that I just want to assert that, not all students have profound shifts, but we don't know, the moments of learning, right? So the seeds may be planted in this semester, and then they flower and cultivate over time. So it's been an awesome experience. Thank you,
Yes.
Mike.
Thank you, both of you. Just like the flowers at the background of Julia's screen that we see today. That was another brilliant presentation with two voices of educator and student. And that's how all of the chapters have been written. So thank you so much. And we're now moving to Sweden. Lasse, the floor is yours. You're muted. We cannot hear you.
Thank you. How does emotional intelligence feel? That's the title of the chapter, in which I describe an exercise for cultivating emotional intelligence in the classroom. Emotional intelligence is considered to be an essential area of the sustainability mindset, because sustainability does not only encompass the planet, but also people. Emotion, however, is a rather unconventional subject in business schools. Therefore, teaching emotional intelligence has traditionally focused on its conceptual parts. I take one step further by inviting the students to have an embodied and subjective experience of the phenomenon. In other words, to experience how emotional intelligence feels. I have developed this exercise and used it as a teacher in the mandatory global challenges track at Stockholm School of Economics. And usually it's much appreciated because it opens a window through which the students can see themselves. This exercise is inspired by Marshall Rosenberg's nonviolent communication and mindfulness practices described by Meng in the book Search Inside Yourself. And I feel so much gratitude for the work of these authors. Using the exercise is simple, but don't forget to create a holding environment in which the students can feel safe and be prepared to hold space for questions and comments that may arise. After class, I usually give the students a reflection assignments that is graded pass and fail. In this way, they can use their new tools to explore a conflict in their lives. And I just want to share two short quotes here. Personally, I think writing these reflections is an excellent way for me to process a situation that was not entirely successful. And I generally feel that it will help me in similar cases in the future. This is something that I have found challenging my entire life. I'm sensitive and pretty impulsive, and to sit down and reflect has thus this far been very rewarding for me. I'm convinced that it will help me in future relations. Another student writes, this exercise has forced me to think through a very painful but also important episode. I have previously reflected on how I behaved, but never really put myself in the shoes of the other person and asked myself what she must have felt during this period of her life. This insight gives me a new perspective on her life and my oversight of her needs. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lasse. I think I'll never forget this exercise as we practiced that with our working group in Montepulciano. So it really works. We're now moving back to the S. Ayako, you're the next one. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, everyone. Today I'm going to talk about the chapter is about finding your heart through the climate change impact of the undergraduate business course. And oftentimes we know that we're talking about the climate change and people more focus on the head and hand pedagogies. Not many people are really focused on the heart pedagogy. Even people did have that, but they have a gap between the heart and hand pedagogy to make a more holistic approach. And today I'm going to talk about how this as the class as example, how we make it like a more holistic approach for integrate with the three set of the pedagogies. The start with the class is a hat that students do like a show and tell climate change impact for the business. And then we interview the local climate change advocacies. And then after that, we have the class dialogue about the climate change from scientists. business practitioner, and public policy perspective. When students start to get this kind of climate change impact, then we move to the heart. That student will start to do their carbon footprint reflection analysis paper, knowing individual affect the climate. And after that, we start to move the classroom to the amphitheater. We have the outdoor classroom. And we also finding the tree, just like Michael, finding the love spots from the campus. And then we assign students a couple hours per week to have the reading assignment on their favorite spots. And making the feeling of the nature, appreciate the nature, and how this can be impacted by what they learn from the hat. After we have the group discussion, students move to the hat. Students want to create an infographic to promote and mitigate the climate change around the campus. And after that, they decide to do the campus sustainable consulting project for the local cafes and daily, and how to help this business owner like staff to convert it to the circular economic business model. After that, students are start to reflecting what they have learned. They are not learning from themselves how to behavior to change. They also learn how to promote other for the reflecting of their promoting to change. So this is creating the student social advocacy. And when students establish the social advocacy, that commitment to change is not short-term, will be more established in a long-term perspective. So all the class activity for what we do in the hang-on practice for the sustainable project is not only the class event. The behavior will sustain, and the impact will be more long-term. And that is the most important, is to how to integrating the three head, heart, and hands model to be more holistic approach. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ayaka, with a wonderful connected to action way of teaching that you're practicing. And we're now moving to Florida in the US, but Isabel Romanowski going next. And I think, Isabel, you would have to cover 2 chapters in which you were involved, first yourself and then with Amelia, because we're still missing her.
Okay. Well, I would like to share a little story about an exercise that I shared in the book that is an hour in nature. And I have been doing this exercise for about 12 years with students. But it was a few years ago when I did it with students in Spain that I really got the inspiration that we need to do something with these collecting stories about transformation. That was really the origin of this book that we have here today. So the exercise is called 1 hour in nature, and it is very simple in its implementation. It's just spend 1 hour in nature and do nothing. And as simple as it is very powerful. So the instructions are to go out on your own, do not practice any sport. It's not to go skating or on your bicycle. It's not to go reading. It's not to do writing. It's not to go with music or with your phone. Just be with yourself. And this experience of spending 1 hour in nature, sitting or walking just with yourself is so powerful. And it is an experience that only later, when students start to write their reflections about it in hindsight, they get so much out of it. And we never know in what direction their insights will come. Sometimes it's about experiencing oneness with nature. Sometimes it's about connecting with emotions that they had forgot. One time, a woman from Thailand, she was studying in the US and said she reconnected with her childhood and with her sister that was living in Thailand and she had not been in touch. And she was crying. But after that, she said, I felt so close. I immediately reached out to my family and started a new way of communicating. So we never know in what direction that will go. But it was the students in Spain that triggered this idea because they were so poetic. I never had students writing poems instead of a reflective essay, not all of them, but some spontaneously started to write poetry and finding in the metaphors a way to express something very deep that had happened during that hour. So that is a little bit the story of this hour in nature. It is originally anchored on one of the 12 sustainability mindset principles, which is the concept of oneness in nature and what happens to us when we have that experience, because this is not something that we can analyze intellectually, as some of you said. There are things that we can discuss, but one thing is to experience and another one is to just process it intellectually. So very powerful. And that is the one of the chapters that I wanted to share with you.
Thank you, Isabel. And how about the chapter you did with Amelia? Would you be able to briefly?
Amelia show up. Okay. Well, this was Amelia likes to inspire her students in Jakarta in Indonesia. She teaches in Jakarta, but students are from all over Indonesia. And she wants to inspire them to be change makers. And this particular was with very young students, I think in the first or the second year of college. And they, like many other young people, feel overwhelmed with what is going on, what difference I can make. So we designed an activity together. Can you hear me? Okay. Oh, I lost the sound. Okay. I cannot hear you. Well, I continue talking. If you have to say something, put it into the chat. And in that experience, it was during COVID, so we did it virtually. We set a cap in 200 students, and we were very strict at the time it would start because she said people are very informal. But we had everybody showing up 10 minutes before it started. Really, they were really interested about becoming change makers. And we connected the SDGs, but through some of the targets. And we selected which targets of the SDGs were close to the life of the students, because it's not about doing policy. It's about how can I save water? How can I support the local vendor? So we looked which are these targets that can speak to the context of the students. And then we asked them, choose which things you could start doing right away to be a change maker using your skills. Like if you go to social media, how can you educate others? Or if you're good at taking pictures, how can you communicate through images or change your habits in these categories that they could find that they could either control or influence others. It was so amazing. They posted their commitments online on their social media, and they got rewarded for more likes they had. So they were all very interested in getting a lot of likes because that's what they do anyway. But now they felt that they were influencing their peers and their friends and their colleagues. It was just unbelievable. We got all 5s.
Thank you so much, Isabel, for stepping in. This really feels like there's a collective spirit. And even though Amelia is not with us, we have to congratulate her. She won one of the Aim to Flourish prizes for SDG #1. And that was on the news yesterday. Even though she was not with us, but we had the story of her chapter told by Isabel. They were co-authors for this last story that we wanted to share with you today. And we still have 10 more minutes to go. So we welcome our audience to engage in discussion. So please use the chat to put questions to any of the authors. We'll be happy to moderate them in the chat. But now we will talk among ourselves, because we already have a certain number of questions that this presentations provoked. And I would ask Julia to start with her question that she put in the chat.
Thank you. Wow, this has just been so great. And so my question has to do from your educator positionality. And we're moving through making changes and innovations in curriculum and pedagogy. And I've experienced some pushback. And so my question is, have you experienced some resistance in creating space for these kind of new ways of learning? Who has the resistance been from, and what's been your experience to navigate the process?
Excellent question. Anyone would like to go first?
I can speak.
Thank you.
It depends on how usually when we do the different kind of the activities, we want to learn how you assess, because we will have like a program assessment report. So as long as you know how to assess, and the assess is aligned with the program or school's learning objective, that you are welcome to have a different creative way to do your activity. But you need to make sure your learning activities align with the program or the school's learning objective, and then they have some assessment to assess your activities.
Yeah, so it's a matter of measurement, and once it's resolved, there is less resistance. Any more experiences from other schools?
I could speak to a little bit of that too. One of the things I've always found most interesting in introducing some of these ideas in different circles has been not so much resistance, more so a lack of awareness. I get a lot of, oh, like that's not even on the radar, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, so I've had this kind of interest response where I don't even know if that's been on the radar for a lot of groups. So instead of that feeling of resistance, I've oftentimes gotten more of that feeling of like, oh, I didn't even think of that. So I've noticed it kind of pops a little bit. You know, you drop that and people are like, you just. I always smile when I see some good down-home cognitive dissonance. So it was, you know, kind of nice in that context. So yeah, that's been that direction. One way I think about it.
Thank you, Michael. Anyone else?
Maybe give a different perspective. My school, and I think Morgan said the same thing, our schools are very supportive. In my personal experience, sometimes it's the students who find it a little bit weird at first. And I guess it's maybe because they're so used to the other way of doing things that they feel surprised. Is this a waste of time? What do you mean? And in my experience, it has been very helpful to get the help from previous students who went through it and came out the other end kind of convinced. So they believe their peers more than they believe you as an instructor. So I would suggest that as a way of helping with the pushback from students.
And that's why you're launching Aim to Flourish body learning type of support, which is global, international, and many of us here in this group will be joining you with this. I believe, yes, that's the most convincing, when peers talk to peers and students get convinced by their own peers. Thank you so much. And we have the next question from Isabel. Maybe you can also voice it, or I can help you. It's in the chat.
Yeah, well, I had two questions, one for Julia and one for Jan, and they're both kind of in the same direction. How do you get your activities moving? Do you suggest prompts, Julia, for your students? Do you help them with steps for the assignment? And for Jan, I was very intrigued. Who plays the bad guy in your strategy? Who says, oh yes, the unsustainable way is the way to go?
So yes, so maybe plug for the book. The actual assignment instructions are in the chapter. So buy the book and get the instructions. It's quite linear. It's interesting. It's paradox. We want to do nonlinear, you know, direct intuitive kind of knowing, but the steps are very linear. And I think that itself paradoxically is important for the students to experience a both and. But then also, Isabel, your question to me prompted me to think that I can do a better job setting up the container, like the container for the brave space to go there, right? So I'm going to be a little more mindful going forward to set up the container for students to have this experience. So thank you for the question.
Thanks, Isabel. I use Michael Porter's value chain, the idea of primary activities and support activities, thinking that a primary activity in a company produces costs or across the collaboration of companies, and then you have this margin. And I'm telling students that you are part of the top management of a company, and the board tells you to maximize profit, and that happens through minimizing costs. And then I tell students, I put them in the situation where the pressure is on them. So I'm the bad guy, but I make them complicit. And it is fascinating to see how the initial resistance, knowing that this is morally not okay, it turns into very dark fantasy. And they will come up with all sorts of things that that you can still see today in today's business, where any kind of human rights, environmental concerns are wiped away, and you just maximize monetary profit. So it creates a very dark atmosphere, and I think, as I mentioned before, that is then the starting point. That's where you actually see a contrast to where we should be instead. Thanks for the question.
Thank you, Jan. Any more comments, questions from the audience? I just see lots of remarks that was so powerful, and thank you for sharing. Maybe Morgan, you have had a remark. Would you like to add on it in the chat box?
I had a remark, sorry. When I reacted to Isabel's comments, yeah, I just really the same experience as Isabel at Excelia Business School. We don't have much resistance, much more from the students who are surprised or reluctant, or they don't know what we expect from them. But the school itself is very supportive, and on the contrary, we have some prizes for innovation, so teachers get awarded a prize when they innovate, and it's very, very much supported also with a special lab to develop new tools and innovation in teaching.
Oh yeah, so institutional support is there, and awards, that's also a powerful tool to promote innovative teaching methods. Okay.
One more comment, Ekaterina. You know, listening to these stories, and although I have read them, and every time I hear them, there are more details. And it makes me think how many other stories of pedagogical innovation we have out there. And this time we collected 150 voices of students and 17 authors. But maybe we should then start thinking of the volume 2. Who are the other voices that haven't had the chance this time? Because it seems that there's so much innovation out there. And with these voices of the students, it makes it really powerful to see the impact.
Yes, Isabel will never stop with her innovations, ideas, and actions. So we're now finished with this volume, which is forthcoming hopefully by the end of 2021, beginning 2022, and then we're planning the next volume. So the invitation is open for all of you to join our working group, because this is the part of our collective work collaboration that we have at the working group on sustainability mindset. And we're so happy to have had this discussion here today. Thank you, Prime, for hosting us. And we will be with you for all of the questions. So feel free to get in touch with any one of us. So you have all our contacts, and we'll be happy to share our experience. We're open, and thank you so much for being part of this session. We wish all of you good luck, and thank you once again. Thank you all of the contributors for being today and sharing your stories. I think we did a great job. Truly enjoyed being with you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.